Chasm of Immurement is the debut full-length album from Polish death metal band Clairvoyance. This is a band out of Warsaw they basically formed for the sake of playing heavy music and landed on old-school death metal-inspired sounds pretty quickly. They weren't really sure what they were doing in those formative years, but they were putting out stuff very quickly. They put out a demo in 2020, they had an EP on, I think, Blood Harvest in 2022, and all of it was evolving in front of us. It was amorphous, it wasn't really sure what it was. They were inspired by a lot of the things that a lot of new old school death metal is, in terms of touching upon moshable grooves and atmospheric death metal ideas. Where I think the band was most on point with something that was fairly original was probably the Threshold of Nothingness EP. It had an interesting atmospheric component to it. It was something a little bit unclear as to its own direction. It was confusing and sort of interesting because of that. It wasn't great, but I'd reviewed it just a little bit and found that it just kind of it felt like they weren't sure where they were going with it. And it turns out the original idea was maybe more of a better idea, because this new record has more in line with their first demo, kind of a hardcore-ish groove-oriented thing, which supplements that groove-driven sound with plenty of riffs. And so this isn't the typical death metal it might appear to be by that description these days. And to prove it, we'll cut to a clip, and I'll talk a little bit more about why I thought this was a pretty good guitar record overall. And I guess what I mean by a guitar record is that's a huge guitar tone, and it isn't necessarily like a Colin Richardson production from the late 90s or whatnot, but it does feel like we're back in that time where bands will eventually begin to try to stand out with unique sounds in terms of their rhythms, and bring something more than the usual patternation. And while I don't think that Clairvoyance have escaped that idea yet, and their riffs aren't fully there yet, so I think some of them were even just learning how to play the guitar when they started this band, or at least writing death metal songs. And so that kind of shows, a little bit of inexperience shows in the way that they form some of these rhythms, but they're still quite accomplished otherwise. There's great musicians playing on this record, and the riffs are a reason to show up, but the guest guitarists that show up on some of these songs are also pretty entertaining. We get folks from Tumult and Snet who put a little bit of like a Morbid Angel kind of spin on some of these songs. They're doing their best Azagthothian estrangement for some, and they really changed the album at that point. They set the bar a little bit too high, and the band never really reached that point again with those solos. So it's kind of a catch-22. A lot of what this record does is kind of a letdown beyond that point, because we need more of those solos. From my point of view, it really adds a lot of character to this stuff, which is otherwise pretty focused on grooves and kind of swinging movement to keep its propulsion going. Eventually they move towards a couple of slower points and some interesting, what I call idea salad, where it's the riffs make sense in a row, but the idea and the tone of it is off. That's neither here nor there. That's pretty common for death metal nowadays. Otherwise, the thing to say is this is a high quality record. I think that it's made well, it's curated well. It seems like they've got the right idea for how a death metal record should appear and all that, and it's all very prescribed and all very well thought out. But I guess what I'm not getting is kind of this passionate rawness that death metal typically needs to last in mind as something new. They've done a really fine job of sounding like a proper death metal band, and I think the guitar tone is a big step towards that. Overall, it's just a couple of songs here that really stuck in mind, and the majority of it was just cool sounding, and that was enough for a death metal record here. For a debut, it's a pretty strong record for 5 years of development overall, and I think they found a direction to go in, although I don't know how memorable it is beyond the big sound that it puts out. So for me, this score is fairly high for this one. I really enjoyed my time with it. I think it's really well curated, like I said. I think it has a novel sound, and that goes far enough, but my own enjoyment really centered around the guitar thread available and not much else. Could definitely use more solos and whatnot too. Otherwise, so that's generally a high recommendation. See what you think and rate it as you see fit. Go ahead and check out my written review for more of my thoughts, and go check out the album now.